Please do not let him kill me."
Those were the words my daughter whispered into the telephone on the night our family finally shattered. Her voice was so quiet I almost did not recognize it. Behind her, I heard glass breaking. A chair scraping violently across the floor. A man shouting. Then the sound no father ever forgets once he has heard it. His child trying not to cry because she is afraid crying will make the danger worse. By the time 2 county deputies rushed through Emily's front door, my son-in-law was lying face down on his kitchen floor. My knee rested against his shoulder. One of his arms was controlled behind his back. He was furious. Humiliated. And still too drunk to understand that the evening had already stopped belonging to him. "This old man attacked me." Derek Coleman twisted beneath me and shouted toward the deputies. "He broke into my house. He is crazy. Arrest him." But the deputies were not looking at Derek. They were looking at me. One of them noticed the way I controlled Derek's wrist without crushing it. The position of my feet. My breathing. The fact that I had already identified the broken glass, the frightened victim, and the clearest path to the front door before they entered. Military men recognize certain things in one another. Even after decades. Even beneath gray hair, bad knees, and an old fishing jacket. The older deputy stepped closer. "Sir, were you in the service?" I kept my eyes on Derek. "Retired Navy." That was all I said. I did not mention the teams. I did not mention Afghanistan. I did not mention the man whose name still returned to me in dreams. At 68, I had learned that silence was easier. Especially when most of your life had been spent trying to forget what you once needed to survive. 3 months earlier, nobody in our family would have believed things could end that way. Especially not Derek. Derek Coleman was 39 years old. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Perfectly styled hair. White teeth. An expensive watch he checked whenever somebody else was speaking. He sold luxury trucks outside Wilmington and carried himself like a man who expected applause each time he entered a room. When he first married my daughter, I tried hard to like him. The truth is, I wanted to like him. After my wife Carol died from breast cancer 12 years earlier, Emily was the only family I had left. When she brought Derek home smiling like the hopeful girl she had once been, I wanted to believe she had found happiness. So I ignored things. The bragging. The drinking. The way he interrupted her halfway through every story. The way he made jokes at her expense and watched the room to see who would laugh. The way Emily's laughter always sounded slightly nervous whenever he teased her. I told myself every young marriage had rough edges. Perhaps that was my first mistake. My name is Walter Hayes. I am a 68-year-old widower living in a small coastal town in North Carolina. It is the kind of place where everybody fishes, most people attend church on Sunday, and almost everyone pretends family problems stop at the front porch. The people around town knew me as the quiet old man with the faded Ford pickup and the yellow Labrador named Duke. They saw me buying tomatoes at the farmer's market. Repairing lawnmowers for neighbors. Sitting alone inside Ruth's diner every Thursday morning with black coffee and 2 eggs. That was all they saw. And for a long time, that was exactly how I wanted it. I had spent 26 years inside naval special warfare. By the time I retired, I had experienced enough noise, fear, grief, and adrenaline for several lifetimes. I had watched good men leave home and never return. I had carried friends toward helicopters knowing some of them were already gone. I had delivered folded flags to families and watched mothers attempt to remain standing. When my service ended, I did not want medals, speeches, or stories. I wanted quiet. I wanted to wait beside Carol. Drink coffee on the porch. Watch Duke chase birds. Repair broken things that could actually be repaired. Peace became precious. For a while, I believed I had found it. Then Carol died. And years later, I discovered that peace is not always the absence of danger. Sometimes it is simply danger waiting behind a familiar door. The first time I noticed something seriously wrong with Emily's marriage was at Thanksgiving 2 years before the arrest. Emily had always loved cooking. When she was young, she stood beside Carol in the kitchen and learned every family recipe. Sweet potato casserole. Homemade rolls. Pecan pie. Carol taught her how to measure flour by feel and how to tell when bread dough was ready without using a timer. That Thanksgiving, Emily overcooked the turkey slightly. Nothing dramatic. It was a little dry. That was all. Derek carved one slice, chewed it, and smirked.
Well, it is a good thing you are pretty, Em. You certainly are not winning Top Chef.
Several people laughed awkwardly. Emily laughed, too. But I saw something the others missed. Her shoulders tightened before the joke had even finished. It was a tiny movement. Barely visible. The reaction of somebody preparing for pain before the strike lands. Years in the service teach you to notice small reactions. Hands. Eyes. Breathing. The muscles around the jaw. People can lie with words. The body usually tells the truth. After Thanksgiving, I began watching more closely. At Christmas, Derek mocked the sweater Emily wore. At Easter, he snapped at her because she forgot to purchase ice for the cooler. During family dinners, he constantly corrected her. That is not what happened. You are exaggerating again. Emily has always been terrible with details. Small humiliations. Constant little cuts. Nothing large enough for an outsider to call abuse. But repeated often enough to teach Emily that every word she spoke might be challenged. And each time, she smiled through it. That worried me more than if she had shouted back. One July evening, I invited them over for a barbecue. Nothing fancy. Burgers. Corn on the cob. Store-brand potato salad. A few neighbors stopped by. Derek had already been drinking before he arrived. I could smell whiskey beneath his cologne. He watched me turn burgers near the grill. You know, Walt, you are the calmest old man I have ever met. I glanced at him. Is that supposed to be an insult? Nah. He laughed and raised his beer. I am just saying, most retired military guys never stop talking about it. You barely mention anything. That is because I retired. The neighbors chuckled. Derek did not. He had wanted a reaction and had not received one. Men like Derek become uncomfortable when they cannot control the mood in a room. What did you even do in the Navy? He waved his bottle toward me. File paperwork? More uncomfortable laughter. I shrugged. Something like that. He pointed dramatically. See? That is exactly what I mean. Emily talks about you like you were some kind of secret action hero. Emily's face changed. Derek, stop. What? He widened his grin. I am kidding. Then he leaned closer. I think most old military stories are exaggerated anyway. The backyard became quiet. I turned another burger. No anger. No defense. No story. My silence frustrated him more than any threat would have. Men like Derek feed on reactions. Without one, they begin feeling invisible. Several minutes later, Emily followed me into the kitchen to help carry plates. The moment we were alone, she whispered. I'm sorry. I looked at her. For what? For Derek. She reached toward a stack of plates. Her sleeve pulled back. There was a faint bruise near her wrist. Half covered with makeup. My stomach tightened. What happened there? Emily immediately pulled down the sleeve. Nothing. Emily. She avoided my eyes. Dad, please. That word. Please. Not defensive. Not irritated. Afraid. And in that moment, I knew. Perhaps not every detail. But enough. The hardest truth was that I had probably known before that evening. I simply had not wanted to give the fear a name. After everyone left, I sat alone inside my garage workshop. Duke slept beside my chair while rain tapped against the metal roof. I opened an old wooden storage chest I had not touched in years. Inside were pieces of another life. Photographs of men who had never grown old. Challenge coins. Service medals. A folded flag. Old notebooks. And one laminated card containing emergency communication codes. When Emily was 16, I taught her simple safety signals. Nothing extreme. Just precautions. A phrase she could use if somebody was listening. A number she could send if she needed the police. A rule she could remember even when fear made thinking difficult. We treated it like a game at the time. Emily rolled her eyes. "Dad, you watch too many spy movies." Perhaps I did. Or perhaps fathers understand dangers daughters should never need to imagine. Before we finished, I made her memorize one promise. "If you ever use the real distress code, I come immediately. No questions. No delay." That was more than 50 years of fatherhood compressed into one rule. If my child called, I would come. Around midnight, my phone vibrated beside the chair. A message from Emily. "Dad, can you send me Mom's peach pie recipe?" Beneath it were 3 numbers. 391. My blood became cold. 391 meant only one thing. Immediate danger. Call the police. Come now. I stared at the screen for perhaps 2 seconds. Then 26 years of training woke inside my bones. Not rage. Not panic. Focus. I stood. Called emergency services. Collected my keys. Checked the equipment I kept secured for emergencies. Then I left. Not because I wanted revenge. Because my daughter was afraid. And fear changes a father into something very difficult to stop. Young men imagine fear as loud. A racing heart. Shaking hands. Fast breathing. But real fear, the kind that arrives when somebody you love may be dying, can become strangely quiet. Cold. Efficient. That was how I felt driving through the rain toward Emily's neighborhood. The windshield wipers pushed heavy water from the glass. My headlights carved through the darkness. The old Ford rattled each time I struck a pothole. I barely noticed. The emergency dispatcher remained on speaker. "Sir, describe the situation. Possible domestic assault in progress. Female victim inside the residence. Male suspect likely intoxicated. Are weapons involved? Unknown. Are you approaching the house? Yes. Please wait for responding officers. No." The dispatcher became quiet. "Sir, officers are 4 minutes away." "I understand. You need to remain inside your vehicle. My daughter does not have 4 minutes." The young dispatcher took a breath. "Sir, are you armed?" "I have a secured firearm inside the vehicle. I have no intention of using it unless somebody's life is in immediate danger." That was the truth. People misunderstand veterans. They imagine men who have lived through violence are eager to return to it. Most of us spend the rest of our lives trying to avoid it. We know what violence costs. We know that even necessary force leaves something behind. The dispatcher softened her voice. "Please stay on the line. I will handle the situation until the deputies arrive." Then I ended the call. Emily's subdivision stood near the edge of town beside a half-finished development. Several homes remained dark and empty after construction had stalled. Wet pavement reflected the streetlights. The rain had weakened into a steady drizzle when I parked across from her house. Every downstairs light was on. I heard Derek shouting before I opened the truck door. Drunk. Raging. Completely certain that nobody would stop him. I crossed the yard quietly. Age changes movement. At 68, my knees ache in cold weather. My shoulders complain when I reach too high. My back reminds me of every hard landing I made when I was young. But training never completely leaves the body. Not the important parts. Awareness. Balance. Timing. Knowing where to place your weight. Knowing when not to move. Through the front window, I saw Emily. She was backed against the kitchen counter. Crying. One side of her mouth was bleeding. Broken glass covered the floor. Derek stood inches from her face, screaming. He gripped her wrist hard enough to pull her off balance. Every suspicion I had carried became real in one image. Something inside me became perfectly still. People expect me to say I became angry. I did not. Not yet. Anger is emotional. This was different. This was protection. The cold awareness of danger standing near your child. I moved toward the side gate. The patio door was not fully closed. Rainwater drifted through the opening and darkened the curtains. Inside, Derek continued shouting.
You think your daddy is going to save you?
Emily tried pulling her wrist away. Please stop. He shoved her shoulder. Not hard enough to knock her down. Hard enough to remind her that he could. That was enough. I entered silently. No dramatic announcement. No threat. No shouting. The old wooden floor barely creaked beneath my boots. Derek did not notice me until Emily looked beyond his shoulder. Her eyes widened. Dad? Derek turned. For one unbelievable moment, he smiled. Look who is here. He spread his arms. Captain America. I kept walking. Step away from her. He scoffed. Or what?
Step away from my daughter.
Emily's breathing was shallow. Her back remained against the counter. Derek laughed. The old man is serious. Then he pointed toward me. You know what your problem is, Walt? Everybody treats you like some wise old veteran. But you are nothing. You are just another retired nobody hiding inside a garage. I did not answer. He stepped toward me. Then he made the worst decision of his life. He attempted to swing. The movement ended almost before it began. I redirected his arm, moved behind him, controlled his balance, and brought him safely to the floor. One smooth action. No unnecessary strike. No rage. Only restrained. Derek's face met the kitchen floor. His breath exploded into a curse. What happened? He attempted to rise. I controlled his wrist and shoulder. Stop resisting. How did you?
Stop moving.
Emily remained frozen. Tears covered her face. Derek twisted again. I adjusted the pressure slightly. He stopped. You are hurting me. You are not injured.
You are restrained.
The entire confrontation lasted perhaps 30 seconds. Then blue and red lights flashed across the living room walls. 2 deputies rushed through the front door. Sheriff's Department. I lifted one hand slowly. Victim is secure. Suspect is restrained. Both deputies froze for half a second. One aimed toward Derek. The older deputy studied me. Not my face. My posture. The controlled breathing. The way I had positioned myself between Derek and Emily. Sir, stand slowly. I nodded and released the hold. The moment he was free, Derek rolled over and began shouting. This man attacked me. He broke into my house. He is insane. The older deputy ignored him. He looked toward Emily. Ma'am, are you injured? Emily's mouth trembled. Yes. One word changed the entire room. The younger deputy handcuffed Derek. Derek continued yelling. Nobody listened. Emily's knees weakened. She leaned against the counter and began crying. Not ordinary tears. The kind that come when years of fear finally discover they are allowed to leave. I took a blanket from the chair and placed it around her shoulders. The same way I had wrapped her after thunderstorms when she was little. You're safe. She clung to me. Her hands gripped the back of my jacket. And that nearly broke me. Fathers believe they will always recognize when their children are suffering. But suffering can grow quietly. It can learn to smile at holidays. It can apply makeup over bruises. It can laugh at cruel jokes. It can live inside your family for years while everyone pretends not to see it. After the emergency medical team arrived, the older deputy approached me. His voice was low. Respectful. You military? I nodded. Retired Navy. His eyes lowered briefly toward where Derek had been restrained. Then back toward me. You handled yourself professionally. The word almost made me laugh. Professionally. As though this had been another operation. It was not. This was my daughter. And as I watched the medics examine the injury near her mouth, a painful truth settled inside me. I should have come sooner. The strangest thing about a house after violence is the silence. Not peaceful silence. Heavy silence. The kind that settles into walls, furniture, and clothing like smoke after a fire. Emily stayed with me after Derek's arrest. She returned to the bedroom she had slept inside as a teenager. The faded horse poster still hung on one wall. Carol's quilt remained folded across the bed. The small ceramic lighthouse lamp still sat on the nightstand. I had never changed the room after Emily left. Perhaps part of me always hoped she would come home again. Just not like this. The first morning after the arrest, I woke before sunrise. Old habits do not retire simply because the body does. I made coffee. Rain touched the kitchen windows. Duke slept near the back door. Emily came downstairs wearing one of my old navy sweatshirts. The injury near her mouth appeared darker in daylight. Purple swelling. A small cut. Seeing it made my chest tighten again. She avoided my eyes while pouring coffee. "I'm sorry." I frowned. "For what?" "For all of this." That answer told me how long she had been trapped. Victims often apologize for surviving. They apologize for the noise. For the police. For worrying people. For failing to hide another person's cruelty more effectively. I pulled out a chair. "Sit down." She sat across from me. "You do not owe me an apology." Her eyes filled immediately. "I should have left him earlier." I took a slow breath. "Perhaps." Her shoulders dropped. Then I continued. "But fear keeps people in bad places longer than they ever imagined staying." Emily stared into the coffee. "I did not want you to think I failed. After war. Funerals. Cancer. And 68 years of learning how to survive pain." That sentence still cut straight through me. I looked away because part of her fear belonged to me. I had not been an easy father after Carol died. That is a truth older men often avoid admitting. My generation was taught to treat grief like weakness. A man worked through pain. Stayed quiet. Kept moving. So that was what I did. I repaired engines. Cleaned gutters. Mowed the lawn twice a week. Accepted every request from neighbors. Anything that prevented me from sitting still long enough to feel how empty the house had become. Emily had been 24 when her mother died. An adult. But still young. Still heartbroken. Still needing her father. I had not abandoned her physically. I attended the funeral. Answered the telephone. Repaired whatever broke. But emotionally, I had disappeared into myself. Not cruelly. Quietly. Children notice emotional distance even after they become adults. Perhaps Emily had married Derek partly because his constant attention felt like the opposite of my silence. Perhaps my absence had taught her to accept whatever form of closeness she could find. I could not rewrite that. But I could refuse to remain distant now. A few days later, Emily began talking. Really talking. We sat on the back porch while rain drifted across the marsh beyond my property. Duke chased squirrels through the wet grass. Emily held a mug of tea with both hands. He was not always like this. I stayed quiet. At first, Derek was charming. Funny. Protective. That is often how it begins. She nodded. After we married, little things changed. What things? He began criticizing my friends. She paused. Then my clothes. Another pause. Then the way I talked. I listened without interrupting. That is something age eventually teaches you. People do not always need solutions immediately. Sometimes they need enough silence to finally tell the truth. If dinner was not ready when he expected, he became angry. If I disagreed with him around other people, he punished me afterward. What kind of punishment? She swallowed. The silent treatment at first. Her voice became smaller. Then yelling. I already knew what came next. The first time he shoved me, he cried afterward. He said work had been stressful. He said it would never happen again. I closed my eyes briefly. Apology. Excuse. Temporary kindness. Then escalation. The cycle is predictable from the outside. Inside it, hope makes every apology feel like proof the old person may return. I kept thinking if I became calmer, or kinder, or better, things might return to normal. That is not how men like Derek work. I know that now. She looked at me carefully. But I did not know it then. The pain in her voice was not only fear. It was shame. That is another part of abuse people fail to understand. Shame traps victims almost as effectively as fear. Especially people from respected families. Especially women taught to protect appearances. I was embarrassed people would think I chose the wrong man. I leaned back. Everybody chooses the wrong person at least once. She shook her head. Mom did not. That hurt. Carol had been warm where I was guarded. Gentle where I was disciplined. Open where I was silent. Emily inherited her mother's softness. Perhaps that softness attracted a man who mistook kindness for weakness. But kindness was never Emily's weakness. Derek's belief that he had the right to exploit it was his. Several days later, Detective Sarah Bennett visited the house. She was in her mid-40s. Direct. Calm. The kind of investigator who did not waste words making frightened people more frightened. She sat at my kitchen table with a laptop and several folders. Emily twisted a tissue in her lap. We searched Derek's phone and computer. Detective Bennett opened a file. There is evidence supporting an ongoing pattern of domestic abuse. Emily looked down. Then she whispered. There is more. The detective waited. Emily reached inside her purse and removed an old flash drive. I started recording some arguments several months ago. Detective Bennett connected the drive. The first recording lasted less than a minute. That was enough. Derek shouting. Something breaking. Emily crying. Then one sentence froze everything inside me.
If your father ever interferes, I will make sure he regrets it.
Detective Bennett removed the headphones. That is going to help your case. Emily lowered her head. I know recording him was wrong. The detective immediately shook her head. No, honey. Surviving is not wrong. I watched those words reach my daughter. Sometimes victims need somebody with authority to give them permission to stop blaming themselves. Emily had spent years hearing that everything was her fault. One honest sentence began challenging the entire structure Derek had built inside her mind. That evening, after the detective left, I went into the garage alone. I sat at my old workbench and stared into darkness. Combat memories returned more frequently after Derek's arrest. Trauma works that way. You spend decades locking doors inside your mind. Then one emotional shock opens all of them at once. I remembered young men bleeding beneath foreign skies. Parents being told their sons would not come home. The way I trained myself to become emotionally distant because soldiers survived by separating pain into compartments. Perhaps I had done the same thing as a father. Compartmentalized until Emily stopped believing she could reach me. Later that night, she found me inside the garage. She stood beside my chair. Cannot sleep either? I shook my head. For a minute, we listened to the rain. Then she asked a question nobody had asked me in years. Dad, were you scared overseas? I smiled faintly. All the time. She looked genuinely surprised. But you're a SEAL. Training does not remove fear. What does it do? It teaches you what to do while you are afraid. Emily stared at the floor. I was afraid every day with Derek. I reached over and took her hand. You do not have to live afraid anymore. For the first time since she was a little girl, my daughter leaned against my shoulder and cried herself to sleep. Derek's preliminary hearing took place in late October. Gray skies. Cold rain. One of those damp Carolina mornings that settles into old injuries and refuses to leave. Emily sat beside me outside the courtroom holding coffee with both hands. She looked healthier than she had in years. But healing is not a straight road. Some mornings, she smiled. Other mornings, she barely left the bedroom. Trauma arrives in waves. I had learned that far from home. Now my daughter was learning it inside her own body. Inside the courtroom, Derek looked smaller. Not physically. Spiritually. His expensive suits were gone. His hair looked unwashed. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes. His confidence had been built partly from the certainty that consequences belonged to other people. Several weeks inside county custody had weakened that certainty. When he saw Emily beside me, his jaw tightened. His parents sat behind him. Exhausted. Embarrassed. I felt sorry for them. No parent raises a child hoping he will become cruel. At least, I do not believe they do. Derek's attorney stood and began transforming him into the victim. That happens often in domestic violence cases. Especially when the accused possesses money, confidence, and a family capable of hiring polished attorneys. The lawyer described Derek as a stressed husband. A successful provider. A man struggling emotionally. Then he turned toward me. And Mr. Walter Hayes used excessive force while acting outside the law. I remained still. The prosecutor looked almost bored. Performance can distract people. Evidence is much harder to distract. The state presented photographs of Emily's injuries. Medical records. The audio recordings. Statements from neighbors who heard shouting. Then came the body camera footage. The courtroom watched the deputies enter the kitchen. There I was. Calm. Controlled. Restraining Derek without striking him. No screaming. No revenge. Only containment. One camera captured Derek continuing to threaten Emily after the deputies arrived. Another showed the blood near her mouth and broken glass across the floor. The defense attorney's argument began collapsing before the footage ended. Derek still took the stand. He blamed the alcohol. His job. Stress. Marriage problems. Emily being too sensitive. Everybody except himself. Then he looked directly toward me. He brainwashed her against me. Something changed inside Emily. I felt it beside me. Her shoulders straightened. She stood before anybody asked her to. Her voice shook at first. No. The courtroom turned toward her. My father did not brainwash me. She took one breath. He saved my life. The silence that followed was complete. Emily described years of emotional abuse. The insults. Isolation. Fear. The exhausting effort of measuring every word because the wrong tone could ruin an entire evening. The way she had stopped seeing friends because Derek found fault with all of them. The way she apologized before asking ordinary questions. The way she listened for his truck and felt her stomach tighten when it entered the driveway. Several people inside the courtroom became emotional. Then Emily said the sentence that broke something open inside me. I stopped recognizing myself during that marriage. War wounds people violently. Abuse can erase them slowly while they remain alive. That truth struck harder than many combat memories. During a recess, the prosecutor approached me near the vending machines. You were special warfare, were you not? I nodded. How could you tell? My brother served in Marine Recon. Military people often recognize one another. She lowered her voice. Your restraint that night probably protected your daughter's case. What do you mean? If you had lost control and seriously injured Derek, the defense would have shifted attention toward you. They would have argued that he was the victim. I nodded. She was right. Revenge may feel satisfying for a moment. Control protects the people you love for much longer. That lesson had taken me decades to understand. The final sentencing hearing occurred 6 weeks later. Emily almost chose not to attend. Eventually, she decided she needed to see the process end. That morning, I climbed into the attic. I opened the old garment bag containing my Navy dress uniform. The last time I had worn it was at Carol's funeral 12 years earlier. She had always loved seeing me in uniform. She said it reminded her that beneath all my quietness remained a man who had once carried himself with pride. After the funeral, I packed it away. I assumed it would remain there until I died. Life has a way of reopening old closets when family is involved. The fabric smelled faintly of cedar and age. I attached the metals one at a time. Each piece of metal carried memories I rarely visited. Friends laughing inside aircraft. Young men writing letters home. Funerals beneath flags. I held the silver star for several seconds before placing it on the jacket. I had never liked metals. Metal cannot return the dead. It cannot explain the cost of survival. But symbols matter to people. They remind the comfortable that sacrifice existed before they arrived. When I entered the courthouse in full dress uniform, conversation stopped. Emily stared at me. You never wear that. I know. You look different. Perhaps I did. Or perhaps she was finally seeing the parts of me I had hidden for years. Inside the courtroom, Derek's expression changed when he saw me. For the first time since I had known him, genuine fear crossed his face. Not fear that I would hurt him. Fear that he had badly misjudged the man he mocked. The quiet old veteran he humiliated at barbecues had carried burdens Derek could not endure for a week. The judge reviewed the evidence. Then she asked whether I wished to speak. I stood slowly. Every joint reminded me I was no longer young. My voice remained steady. I spent much of my life around violence. The courtroom became silent. I have seen war, death, fear, loss. I looked toward Derek. And I learned that strength has nothing to do with making other people afraid of you. Several people lowered their eyes. Real strength is protecting people who cannot protect themselves. I paused. Especially family. Derek looked down. The arrogance had disappeared. What remained was shame. Then I said something I had not expected to say. I do not hate Derek. Emily turned toward me. I hate what he became. I hate what he did. But hatred spreads damage if you continue feeding it. The judge listened carefully. I am asking the court for accountability, not destruction. That distinction mattered. I did not want Derek free to hurt Emily again. I also did not want revenge to turn me into another version of him. The sentence included prison time, mandatory alcohol treatment, domestic violence rehabilitation, and permanent protective orders. As deputies led Derek away, he stopped near the door. He looked toward Emily. Tears filled his eyes. Not the polished tears he once used after hurting her. These appeared broken. I'm sorry. Emily did not answer. She simply reached for my hand. Then Derek disappeared through the courtroom doors. For the first time in years, the fear inside my daughter's eyes was gone. Winter passed slowly after the trial. Healing at our age does not happen quickly. Neither does trust. Neither does forgiveness. Everything arrives one careful step at a time. By February, the cold rain began giving way to softer mornings. The trees behind my property showed hints of green. Emily slowly began rebuilding her life. She found a small apartment downtown above a florist shop owned by an elderly widow named Diane. The apartment was not luxurious. But it was safe. Quiet. Sunlight filled the kitchen every morning. Safety becomes beautiful after chaos. Emily began working part-time at the public library. At first, she worried everyone would whisper about the trial. Small southern towns can be cruel. They can also surprise you. Most people treated her gently. Especially older women. Women who had lived long enough to recognize pain even when somebody tried hiding it. One afternoon, Emily and I sat inside a coffee shop. I thought everyone would judge me for staying. I stirred cream into my cup. Most people over 60 have survived something they once believed they would never tolerate. That changes how they see others. She looked down. I still feel ashamed sometimes. That feeling may remain for a while. She looked worried. So I added. But shame fades faster when it is exposed to love instead of secrecy. Carol used to say things like that. Marriage leaves pieces of another person living inside you long after they are gone. My life changed, too. For years after retirement, I had isolated myself more than I realized. Routine became a hiding place. Hardware store. Fishing pier. Television. Sleep. Repeat. After everything with Emily, silence no longer felt peaceful. It felt lonely. So I began reconnecting with people. Mostly veterans. A retired Marine named Curtis persuaded me to attend Wednesday breakfast at the VFW Hall. At first, I resisted. Too many memories. Too many stories I did not want to tell. Eventually, I went. Old soldiers laugh more than civilians expect. We talked about grandchildren. Bad knees. Blood pressure. Medication. Boats that refuse to start. Very little about combat. That surprises younger people. Veterans do not usually spend old age reliving glory. Most of us spend it appreciating ordinary peace. One morning, Curtis studied me across the table. "You seem lighter lately." I thought about that while driving home. Perhaps he was right. Not happy exactly. Lighter. As though some old weight had finally shifted. In the spring, Emily brought my grandson Noah over for Sunday dinner. Noah was 10. Skinny. Curious. Missing one front tooth. Before the divorce proceedings, Derek rarely allowed Noah to visit without him. He said I was too old-fashioned. Now Noah ran through my backyard as though he owned it. Children can recover from tension faster than adults when safety reaches them early enough. That afternoon, we sat beside the small lake near my property fishing for bluegill. Dragonflies skimmed the water. Noah studied me. "Mom says you were in the Navy." I was. "Like regular Navy?" I smiled. "Something like that." He grinned. "Mom says you tackled Dad like Batman." I nearly choked laughing. "Your mother exaggerates." "No, she does not." "Yes, she does." "Nope." Then Noah became quiet. Why was Dad so mean? There it was. The question every child eventually asks when an adult's cruelty enters the family. I looked across the lake. Sometimes people carry anger they never learn how to control. Did he hate Mom? No. That is what makes it sad. Noah frowned. Then why did he hurt her? I thought about violence. War. Control. Fear. Abuse. Then I gave him the simplest truth I knew. Because some people confuse love with ownership. He considered that. Children often understand more than adults expect. Several minutes later, I handed him the fishing rod. Do you know what real strength is? What? Making people feel safe when they are around you. 15 minutes later, Noah caught a bluegill barely larger than his hand. He celebrated as though he had landed a marlin. At 10 years old, he already handled disappointment better than many grown men. One evening in early summer, Emily arrived carrying an envelope. There is no return address. I recognized the prison stamp. Derek. We sat at the kitchen table. She watched while I opened it. The letter was handwritten. Messy. No polished language. No legal excuses. Derek admitted things I never expected him to admit. His drinking. His insecurity. His obsession with control. His shame. One sentence stood above everything else. I spent years trying to feel powerful by making everyone around me smaller. That sentence suggested rehabilitation might be beginning. Not complete. Not guaranteed. Beginning. Emily watched me fold the letter. What do you think? I think remorse is painful when it is real. Do you forgive him? The question sat between us. At 68, I had learned forgiveness is not a light switch. It is a decision you may need to practice repeatedly. Sometimes every morning. I do not know yet. Emily nodded. That is fair. Then, after a long silence, she reached across the table. Thank you for saving me. I looked at my daughter. Healthier. Stronger. Still healing. And I understood something important. I had not saved her alone. She saved herself the moment she asked for help. Many people never make that call. It takes courage to admit fear. It takes courage to send the code. It takes courage to open the door when somebody comes. Several Sundays later, our family gathered for dinner at my house. Nothing fancy. Fried chicken. Mashed potatoes. Cornbread. The kind of meal Carol prepared when money was tight but love was not. Sunlight entered through the kitchen windows. Noah laughed at something on television. Duke waited beneath the table for somebody to drop food. Emily looked peaceful. Not the forced smile she had worn at holidays. Not the careful expression of someone measuring another person's mood. Real peace. I listened to dishes clattering and family voices filling the house. Then I understood something that had taken nearly 7 decades to learn. When I was young, I thought strength meant winning fights. War taught me that strength meant surviving pain. Age taught me something deeper. Strength is answering the phone when someone you love is afraid. Strength is remaining calm when anger would feel easier. Strength is protecting people without losing your humanity. And sometimes strength is allowing yourself to heal, too. For years, Derek believed power meant fear. He believed that if Emily became frightened enough, she would never leave. If he humiliated her often enough, she would stop trusting her own judgment. If he isolated her completely, nobody would hear the truth. He was wrong. Fear may create obedience for a while. It does not create loyalty. It does not create love. And eventually, even the quietest victim may remember that somewhere in the world is a person who promised to come when called. I sometimes replay the night Emily sent the message. Not the restraint. Not Derek's face against the kitchen floor. Not the police lights. I replay her first words. "Please do not let him kill me." No father should hear those words. But every daughter should know that when she says them, somebody will move. Somebody will believe her. Somebody will come. I had spent years believing my most important acts of courage happened overseas. They did not. The hardest thing I ever did was not entering Emily's house. It was remaining calm after I entered. It was seeing the blood near her mouth and choosing control over rage. It was allowing the law to hold Derek accountable instead of using my own hands to punish him. It was listening to my daughter describe years of pain without making her comfort me for hearing it. It was admitting that my emotional absence after Carol's death may have made Emily feel she had nowhere to return. Those were battles nobody trained me to fight. People like simple heroes and simple villains. Life rarely provides them. Derek did terrible things. He also became that man through choices, wounds, addiction, and unchecked anger. Understanding that does not excuse him. Compassion is not the absence of consequences. Forgiveness is not permission to return. Emily can hope Derek changes and still keep the door permanently closed. She can wish him healing without surrendering her safety. Boundaries are not cruelty. They are the walls around the life she is rebuilding. My grandson sometimes asks whether his father will become good again. I never promise what I cannot control. I tell him, people can change. But changing requires more than saying sorry. It requires living differently for a long time. Noah understands. Children know the difference between promises and patterns. Adults are often the ones who pretend not to. Emily still has difficult days. A raised voice inside a restaurant can make her body become tense. A glass breaking unexpectedly can return her to that kitchen. Sometimes she checks the door twice before sleeping. Healing does not mean the memories disappear. It means the memories stop making every decision. She is learning that slowly. So am I. We talk more now. Not only about serious things. The weather. Books. Noah's school. The flowers outside her apartment. What Carol would have cooked for dinner. Ordinary conversations. That is how relationships return. Not through one dramatic rescue. Through 100 ordinary moments after it. Calls answered. Coffee shared. Silences that no longer feel like abandonment. The dress uniform returned to the attic. The medals went back into the garment bag. I do not need to wear them again. Emily knows who I was. More importantly, she knows who I am now. Not a secret hero. Not Captain America. Not an old man hiding inside a garage. Her father. The man who promised he would come. And when the code finally arrived after all those years, kept the promise. I often think about the moment the older deputy asked whether I had served. I answered. Retired Navy. That was true. But service does not truly end when the uniform comes off. The battlefield changes. The people you protect change. The body grows older. The mission becomes quieter. Sometimes the person who needs rescuing is no longer a stranger in another country. Sometimes she is your daughter, standing inside her own kitchen, afraid she may not survive the night. I could not return every year Derek took from Emily. I could not erase the insults. The fear. The nights she stayed awake listening to him breathe. I could not restore the version of herself she was before the marriage. But perhaps that is not the goal. Emily is not becoming the woman she used to be. She is becoming somebody new. Somebody who understands that softness and strength can live inside the same heart. Somebody who knows asking for help is not failure. Somebody who can teach her son that love should feel safe. Carol would have been proud. I wish she had been there. I wish she could have held Emily through the difficult nights. Carol had a way of comforting people that never made them feel weak. I am still learning that skill. Perhaps I will never do it as well as she did. But when Emily needs me, I stay. I no longer repair lawnmowers or clean gutters to escape difficult feelings. I sit beside her. I listen. Sometimes that is the most useful thing a father can do. The night everything broke apart was also the night something began returning. Emily's voice. Her courage. Her relationship with her son. Her trust in me. My willingness to be emotionally present. Derek believed calling me would make things worse for Emily. He had spent years teaching her that nobody would believe her. That her father would judge her. That leaving would destroy the family. When she sent the code, she challenged every lie at once. And when I came through that patio door, the control he had built began collapsing. That is the part of the story I want people to remember. Not that an old veteran put a younger man on the floor. That is not the victory. The victory is that a frightened woman asked for help. Someone believed her. The police documented the truth. The court listened. And slowly, through courage, support, and time, she reclaimed her life. Strength is not making another person feel small. It is not controlling where somebody goes, what she wears, or who she speaks to. It is not winning every argument through fear. That is weakness pretending to be authority. Real strength creates safety. It protects without possessing. It remains calm when rage would be easier. It accepts accountability. It allows another person to remain fully herself. I thought the most important promise I ever made was inside a military ceremony. I was wrong. The most important promise was made inside an ordinary house to a 16-year-old girl rolling her eyes at her overprotective father. If you send the real distress code, I come. No questions. No delay. Years later, she sent it. And I came. Today, Emily lives in her own apartment. She works at the library. Noah visits me on weekends. Duke is older and sleeps through most of our conversations. I still drink black coffee at Ruth's Diner every Thursday. But I no longer sit alone. Sometimes Curtis joins me. Sometimes Emily does. On school holidays, Noah comes and orders enough pancakes for 3 people. The people around town still see the quiet old man with the pickup truck. That is fine. I no longer need anyone to know the entire story. The people who matter already do. And every once in a while, Emily sends me a message. Dad, do you still have Mom's peach pie recipe? The first time she sent it after the trial, my heart stopped for half a second. Then I saw the next line. No emergency. No code. I really want to bake a pie. I laughed until my eyes filled. Then I drove to her apartment and brought the recipe myself. We baked it together. It did not taste exactly like Carol's. Nothing ever will. But it was close. And for that evening, close was more than enough. The night began with my daughter whispering,
"Please do not let him kill me."
It ended with her wrapped inside a blanket, holding me like she had when thunderstorms frightened her as a child. The months that followed were difficult. There were courtrooms. Tears. Fear. Regret. And truths none of us could avoid any longer. But there was also healing. Not sudden. Not perfect. Real. At 68 years old, I finally learned that protecting family is not only about arriving when danger appears. It is also about remaining after the danger is gone. It is answering the difficult questions. Listening without judgment. Admitting your own failures. Allowing accountability without demanding destruction. And reminding the people you love, as many times as necessary, that fear does not own their future. I could not protect Emily from every painful choice. No father can. But when the moment came, I protected her from believing she had to face the danger alone. And sometimes that is the strongest promise one person can give another. I am here. I believe you. You are safe now.